Going into dropping that album, I believe 1988. What do you remember most about the reaction from the consumers, reading the magazine articles, reviews? What do you remember most after that album dropped?
Um, I remember everything was fairly positive because again, it was a little bit different than everything else. There was no shooting, no killing. We were able to go places a lot of other MCs or rappers couldn't go or weren't invited because again, we were that Long Island group that just represented, this type of style. Um, we didn't talk about anything negative or anything like that. It was just, being young and doing whatever we did.
What was some of your favorite lineups as far as going out on touring around this time?
Um, I don't know honestly because I wish I had taken a lot of pictures. I know that part. There was a lot of people that turned out to be bigger at then. Everybody was kind of fresh and young at the time. We were out with so many different artists at the time. And I don't know. I just never was a picture taker. Even with the D&D stuff, I was never a picture taker. And I realize now I should have been because
Mm,
I've been around so many different people that ended up being a little bit different than they were with the time we met them. We were all just hanging out, between the Latifahs and all those kind of things. So it was it was fun all around. No question about that. It was fun all around.
right. How long after the album dropped did you guys decide you wanted off the label, and the reasoning behind the label?
But that's pretty good. Um, that's a good question. I would love to say almost immediately, but I think once the album came out and we understood a little bit more about things, we kind of got the vibe that we probably were not. Well, we got the information from what had happened with BDP, and then we started to see the inner workings of the company itself, and the rumors and all these kind of things. And once we got that kind of flow, it was just like, something just doesn't seem like this is going to work. And we just really weren't getting along as far as what we were supposed to be doing. So we actually stopped recording, but we didn't owe him anything. We didn't owe him anything at all. So it worked out from that standpoint. But then we had to find, unfortunately, somebody else was interested at the time, which turned out to be Idlers, and we had to pay to get off of that label. But the stuff was already done, and we had no plans of doing a second album. We hadn't recorded anything for a second album except for those secret songs. But um, that's about it.
Right. How hard was it to get off the label?
Um, I know it wasn't fun, and I know I hmm, it was quite difficult, but not as much because they didn't have a position at that point. They had just fleeced whomever for BDP, so they had already blown that money, I'm sure. So there wasn't really a deal that they were trying to do a whole lot of fighting. It was just sure. I guess they figured they had a lineup of their own actually, and they would just roll with somebody off of there.
What was the chemistry like amongst you guys going into Forcefield, going into your second album?
Um, we were actually pretty solid. We knew what we had to do. We knew what the situation was, and we knew we weren't comfortable with it. And we were just ready to work. We were just ready to get whatever we had to do, done. So fortunately, we had started doing those recordings, and then we realized that doing those recordings made no sense because they were still those were going to get billed the studio time. So we just stopped, and then we were cool. We were doing what we had to do, and then we decided once we get off, we're going to start a whole fresh new thing.
What kind of adjustments did you guys make going from that debut album into the sophomore? Did you pretty much keep the same format, or did you learn from mistakes made and make adjustments?
Fortunately, we didn't really make mistakes because we didn't really target anything. So, um, what we did do is record what was life at the time, what our mindset was at the time, what our experiences were at the time, and it was just that raw of an album. No structures, no anything, no guidance as far as how it had to be. Um, so we did that, and when the second time came around, we realized um, just how much more structured things were getting. I mean, at that time, I think you still had top billing, which had no structure. So
Right.
that was a bad, that was just what it was. But excuse me, we didn't. We just we focused in a little bit more. Um, I had more access to, I was buying more records. I was searching a little bit harder. Um, my focus was different. I was in full blown production mode. Um, and that's where we were actually working on at that time. Just keep trying to keep the same energy, but now with a little bit more experience, with a little bit more direction. We still were in charge of our own product because that's one thing we wanted to make sure we were.
How was those studio sessions for that particular album?
When we ended up signing to Idlers, and that's the ones that, again, same situation. We went to them after when they Jungle Brothers were on there, and then Girl Our House You was out. All that was going on, and we're like, okay, well, boom, these guys know what the direction was, because the Warner Brothers and things like that, those guys were out of touch with how to handle it. So they were grabbing up the little labels and giving them distribution. So as far as this was concerned, we got there, and when we got there, Warner Brothers had just snapped up Jungle Brothers because of House You and all that stuff. So now here we are walking in as they're walking out. So that wasn't so bad, except they had their own recording studio, the label, which Jungle Brothers did, and their sound was completely gritty. um, Once we started recording a couple of, excuse me, a couple of songs, I started to realize that they were just too dirty. And from Strong Island to all the other stuff that was recorded, this just sounded like a dustbin. And we stopped, and I told him, "Listen, I know you're trying to save on money and all this, but we have to do some tracks where we know what we're doing. We have a different vibe. We got to drive all the way down to Brooklyn, Neptune, no less, and Coney Island from Long Island. So it was like CI to CI just to get that recorded, and it didn't sound like it was representing what I was trying to get at from a sound standpoint. So I said, yeah, we got to do at least a couple of songs, and we ended up going back to the studio, recording a couple of I don't know if we did it on the low, but just a couple of songs, and then we brought them and told them, listen, this is what we're supposed to sound like. What's going on here is something completely different. So that's why a lot of the album sounds this way, and the half of the album sounds that way, because we stopped recording there. And I think Intro to Dance was one of the first ones we did to re-energize the whole Strong Island thing. And I did that just because I knew now how to operate the equipment a lot better. And then the others just followed suit.
Right. When that album dropped, how did the consumers react to Force Field?
Um, the intro single was popular. And it was doing well, getting played and all that kind of stuff. And I think it was a secondary single that they were either putting out or did put out, and it was just so many things that were happening at the same time that that album kind of was in between a couple of different places at the same time, because hip hop had moved but stayed, and then it went to some house stuff, and then it went to some commercial stuff, and so we tried to cover all the bases on that, and we did achieve that, but sonically there was differences that you could hear, and it just everybody was doing it at the time. I mean, you had to represent for what was hot at the time, so you had different sounds, and we did have a house one too. It's all those kind of things were on there, so that's pretty much how that flowed. We just had a little bit more experience by that time.
Right. A few years later, you guys landed at Big Beat. Take us back to how you guys got the deal over there.
I think it was kind of the same situation where we had to go, and I think Stretch and Rob Tulo, I believe. No, Tulo might have come later. Stretch had put us on to I forgot his name. He put us on to somebody at Big Beat, and again, another expensive contract that we had to get out of, and we ended up going to Big Beat. But by that time, um, it was I don't know what was really happening. It took a little bit longer to get things done because now there were different producers in play. They wanted to have another producer as well because they had one on that just did, I think, artifacts. Um, and he brought Todd Ray. Todd, I think it's Todd Ray's name, and he was doing artifacts. So we did a song with him, and we ended up going to Power Play to do it. And I didn't really like Power Play's sound at all, but we went there to do that song. We did it, and we started doing the album as we were supposed to. And I don't recall if we finished the album, honestly. And I'm gonna say we probably didn't. And that's when I ended up using the Bard sample way before for big tracks and these kind of things. I was utilizing way before they actually started getting popping. And Big B probably would have been our best opportunity to do it, but at the time now we'd been on our third deal, and I'm not sure what the vibe really was. I was starting to do production, and I think at that time I started to do, Keith Murray, those tracks. I started doing K Solo's tracks. Another guy that was around the way named Ciroc a lot. He was just a kid that used to rhyme, and I was getting more into the production side of that. So I can't say I was stressed because I just had a lot of ideas, so it was no big deal. So by that time, I think there was some fracturing going on, and that's how we ended up now switching to being two. And once we became two, it kind of changed. At the time, we didn't understand it, but going forward, you understand. You change the dynamic of the actual group, the dynamic of the sound, and it kind of forced me into doing rapping, which I was never really interested in doing. And just to keep that deal in place and to get the single that we had worked on and already paid for ready to go. So, we had all of that. So that's how that turned out. So there's like two versions of big tracks out there. There's probably a promo that had all three of us, and then there's the actual version that had just me, and that was not my preference at the time. It still is not my preference, but that's where that is. So some people were just meant to do the MCN, and they wanted to do that. That was not what I was involved with. So it just turned out that I could, and I did, but that was not my preference.
Right. What eventually happened to the deal at Big Beat?
Eventually it just had to fizzle, basically, because once that happened and you didn't have the 3-man group, you didn't have the same sound. So we could have carried the load, but how many times does that really happen where you remove a member of, especially a vocal member of a group, and try to replace it, other than main source? And I'm not sure how you want to play that one.
No doubt.
I'm trying to find my water here. Oh, there it is. Okay. Sorry.
No doubt. So you mentioned K Solo earlier. At what point did you start to work with him? I know he came out in '90. Were you already having some interaction with him, or was it more towards the second album?
No. I actually did the original Spellbound. And I tell you right now, I know it's on a cassette somewhere in my house, but I moved to 2 different houses. So now I'm just like, I don't know where that tape is, but I have the original Spellbound. And we did that in the Bronx, I believe that's Power Play again, because I think we were still on Idlers maybe around that time. I cannot remember, but I had done that at because he called me. Ironically, he called me at my parents' house from when he was getting out in his first stint in in the facility, and he called me in my house and told me, "Yo, listen, man, I heard your joints are out there to doing their thing, blah blah blah. When I get out, I'm coming to see you." So I said, "All right, come check me out. Let's do it. See what's happening." That's what it was. So he came out with all his rhymes, and he did Spellbound, and we did something else off again, the original sample, the Let's Have a Meeting sample from I forgot what it was called, but he did most of those over when he did his first album. But I had done those, and then I think we were on tour or out of the country a lot. And when he came home, he was hungry. So once he came home, we got kind of stagnant because we did the 2 songs, and then we couldn't do any more until I got back. And by that time, he had linked up with Eric in Paris, and then there goes that. So that was a whole other thing. As far as Keith was concerned, Keith was a friend of my cousin's that used to cut hair, and he introduced me to him, and we talked, and I was like, I like your voice. We should definitely get up and do something. He was, raw again, and I went in and we did Keefy Keef. We did, then it was getting ready to. Then Idlers heard him. It was like, we want to sign him to Idlers. I said, all right. So we were still there at the time, so we did Keefy Keef. We did a couple of different songs. We did like 5 or 6 songs actually. I think I might have 8 that we actually did early in those days, and and kind of the same thing happened. We went back out. We're on tour doing what we got to do. He can't really come with us at the time for various reasons, and hungry again. By the time I got back, he had demo pretty much a couple of demos already in the pocket that we had done. So they had heard who what he sounded like, and and he ended up linking up with Paris again. I don't know if they were hanging out behind my house or something like that, waiting for people, but that's how they were doing it. That's how it turned out. So, so that's how that worked out.
So was Spellbound your first placement outside of JVC Force?
No, I think I did the one that I did with the local guy. I think that was like the first one I did outside of that, and because again, I didn't really know what that was about. I didn't know. I just know I had a lot of tracks that I was doing constantly, and we couldn't do some of them because some of them had a different sound, or I just had so many, and they would pick which one sounded pretty good, or whichever they sounded worked for them. And so that's the beginning of how it went.
At what point do you become a house producer at D&D?
They were doing a compilation. Actually, wait. What ended up happening is once I got past the Big B situation, Q Ball and I met him at I ran into him actually at the post office in CI, and he was telling me, hey, what's going on? Da, 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 da. Actually, he was in between the Big B deal. Met up with him. He came through a couple of times, and we talked, and we were supposed to go in the studio. And I said, let me just get back from this place here, and then we'll get started and see what we can do. So I started doing demos for him, and there was one particular one that I did the beat, and I just liked the beat, and I just jumped on it just to be on it, and that's how that kind of turned into that. Not gonna remember what the original question was. I'm thinking about this.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. So it was just so many people in between there. So
on all that. So
I was big on trying to get everybody, from everybody in the community on. And I helped a lot of people get on. And back then a couple of bucks was a couple of bucks. So these guys really got started. But Q Ball and we started doing those demos. And then somebody introduced me to Mystique. And somewhere in there, another guy that had passed a while back, named Intense, was doing something on a project that D&D was doing. And the guy that was doing the tracks, his name was DJ Technique, he asked me to help on some co-production. So when I think I added some kind of a hook or something to it, so he told me, well, come down when we come down, and so we can record it, the hook that you did, or the little part that you put in, and we're doing it there. We're having a party, and they're gonna have it down there. So I was like, all right, I'll go to the session, bring my discs and everything like that, and I'll jump in on that. And I ran into Doug and Dave, and we talked a little bit, and I was like, yeah, I'll let you guys know if I got anything jumping, but I'm just here doing this. And that's when they were doing the D&D Project 1, I think. So no, I think it was. So I said, all right, I left that where that was, and then that's when I ran into Mystique. and we didn't really know what we were doing. Q Ball and I were in the middle of get trying to get him signed, and they just kept gravitating to the song that he and I did together. Each label was like, he sounds cool and everything, but the songs y'all did together. So I said, all right, let's restructure. We'll go back in. I'll do some more tracks for you, and we'll work from there. But at the same time, I got this Mystique situation that I kind of like her, but I want to do something specifically for her that we don't really rhyme on this kind of beat. So I'm going to do this beat for her, and we'll jump on it so we don't sound like we're doing something we shouldn't be doing. Um, and that's when I did that Tremendous. And in our studio there in Long Island, and I brought it to Doug and Dave, and they were like, "Hey, we're doing this deal with I think with Priorities. So if you want, bring that track and bring that girl. We want to get involved with that." So that's how we ended up doing that. Once we did that, our relationship just kind of flourished at that point. And then it become, because that song came before we were supposed to be working on our album actually, and we did, I had to convince basically Q that we're just going to put this one out first, and then but we're on it. We're just going to put this one out first, and we'll get back to what we're doing. So that's how we end up doing that. So our relationship just flourished from there, and we just started getting into talking more about different things and different projects. And once I started doing that, I was doing production, and the production led to all that being in D&D, doing either consulting or even just doing tracks for any projects they had, and they get some production stuff. So it was just from there. I mean, there were times I would run 2 rooms at the same time, but there's 2 different artists just to keep flowing, because I'm coming down from Long Island all the way to Manhattan, so I'm trying to make sure I get it right, make sure that everything, there's no coming back later on. So that's how that worked out.